Good morning, members, and welcome to today's Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 21st of February 2023. We'll go through a wee bit of housekeeping. I think you all probably know the drill by now. Cameras off and microphones muted if not speaking. If you wish to speak, put speak in the Teams function, or you can use the raised hand function. Claire and I will try and keep an eye on both of those and ensure that we do have contributions where required. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. I would like to assume that all members have read their reports, so officers don't need to go into any massive detail beyond any updates. And obviously, if any member is leaving the meeting, please put leave in the Teams chat function and then return when you do come back. All members speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference pages and paragraphs to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we'll deal with this in our usual very efficient manner. So we'll move to item 1, which is settlement apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Claire, can you provide the settlement and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got 12 members present this morning. 3 members currently not present are Councillors Dryborough, Ingalls and Mayo. I understand Councillor Dryborough could be late this morning. And apart from yourself and the Vice Chair, all other members are present on Teams. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Claire. And I approve members' remote participation. So moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Not seeing anybody indicate at this stage. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, minute of previous meeting of 13th of December 2022. Are we happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of December? And I'll take silence as agreement throughout the entire meeting, I think. Good. Okay, thanks. So those minutes are approved. So moving on to item 4, first substantive paper of today. It's revised guidance on the operation of local authority audit committees and the reports by Head of Governance and Assurance. And Richard Fox is here to assist if members have any questions. Do you have anything to add to the report, Richard?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, good. Okay, so I'll open up the meeting to member debate. And I'll give you all a moment online because I think the majority are there to indicate whether you wish to come in. Councillor Dorward. No problem, Councillor Ingalls.
Morning, Chair. Morning, members. Yeah, very interesting report and a number of recommendations or suggestions that more comments, sorry, Chair, than question. It's an interesting report in terms of introducing lay members, which I understand isn't a new thing, but is something for this committee to look at. Also reducing the size of membership, which is interesting too, and changing the function and purpose slightly of the committee, taking out the scrutiny role, which I find extremely interesting. And being fairly new to this, there's a question there, a historical one. Has the option of lay members been considered before? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dorward. I'll turn to Vlad, I think.
Certainly not within the last 2 years. I couldn't speak beyond that, Chair. I think it's a valid question. Ultimately, we, as members will be aware, we carry out the review of standing orders and schemes and delegations on an annual basis, and obviously there's always an opportunity for these sort of suggestions to come through that process and ultimately for Council to decide upon them, but certainly not that I'm aware of in the last 2 years.
Thanks, Vlad. Richard, do you have anything to add? I don't recall in the 16 nearly years that I've been here, but maybe pre-me.
I've been here 20 years and there certainly haven't been any lay members on the committee. You may have considered it in the past, but it certainly hasn't happened. Thank you.
And I think that answers your question, Councillor Dorward, and it's quite an interesting conversation to have around the merits of lay members, and certainly the smaller membership was something that we had highlighted as a potential, not risk as such, but I think we benefit from a broad range of members on the committee, but I will allow others to speak. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, members. Yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm looking at paragraph 3.10, and it makes reference to, you know, the numerous points that have just been raised, but also regarding political proportionality. And my understanding is that there was a recommendation previously that we should have political proportionality on our audit committee. I understand that, I think prior to 2017 possibly, there was only members of the opposition that sat on the committee, and there was a recommendation that it should include members of the administration. So can I just ask for a bit of clarity about that, because it would appear that there's now a suggestion that we shouldn't have political proportionality, and what's changed in the interim between those two statements, and where was the advice given that we should have proportionality on the committee? It's just, it seems a bit muddled, to be fair. Thanks.
I think a very valid question. Richard, do you want to pick up on that? Or Vlad? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to note that this is not officers' recommendations. This is the guidance from SITFA, and I don't think either Richard or myself can properly address that question that Councillor Hagman's put. I take the point we've got our own position within this council, and this potentially goes against that, and that's ultimately what we're doing here, is to raise it for members' consideration, and ultimately for you to obviously scrutinise that particular point and decide whether you wish to take that forward through the review of standing orders.
Thanks, Vlad. I mean, I seem to have
Can I come back?
Yeah, of course, Councillor Hagman.
Sorry, Councillor McGregor, you were maybe going to say the same point that I was about to come back on. My understanding was that we moved to this not because of officer recommendation, but from a third party, whether it was Audit Scotland or whether it was SITFA previously, I'm not sure. And that's the sort of clarity. Why did we move to the setup we've got now, essentially? Because my understanding, it wasn't from officers' recommendation, it was from out with the council, and it was considered best practice.
I'll bring Vlad in, but my recollection is the same as yours, Katie, that we had a previous arrangement, and then Audit Scotland recommended that we widened the proportionality of the committee, and that was a decision that would have gone through schemes of delegation. And if we wish to reverse that, we would need to take that through schemes of delegation as well. So I suppose it's for the committee to determine whether we want to continue with the proportionality that we have just now, or take the recommendations of SITFA, would be my understanding of it. Just for clarity as well, the SITFA, is this UK-wide guidance or is it specific to Scotland? Because I think that is a fairly crucial question.
This is UK-wide guidance.
Yeah, I'll come in. Thank you, Chair. And through you, I think I don't have the answer to Councillor Hagman's kind of question on how we got here. Again, having only been here for a couple of years. However, we can certainly come back to members, and we can look at the decision that was taken and come back to members of this committee to just clarify the position as to those particular reports that will give the justification as to for that change. So we'll look at that historic change and come back to members on it. In terms of that latter question, it is UK-wide, and as I understand it, normally there seems to be, or there had been a practice of potentially having a more standardised Scottish version of this that maybe looks at it more from a Scottish perspective. That's not the case, as we understand on this particular one, and it's just UK-wide, and they're not currently looking at a specific Scotland guidance.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Vlad. I've got Fiona Mitchell-Knight wishing to come in. She might be able to shine a light on this. Morning, Fiona, and welcome.
morning. Thank you, and very good to meet you all. Come along to my first meeting as the new appointed auditor. Just to confirm, Audit Scotland doesn't have a formal view on political proportional representation, but it's something that we've looked at following the most recent elections, and there is no legislation that requires political proportionality. However, it is accepted as good practice, so it's down to the councils to decide their approach. And SITFA is indeed a Britain-wide organisation, so expectations there. I think the SITFA recommendation here is that if you chose to move away from political proportionality to get specific skills from lay people on the committee, that wouldn't necessarily be seen as a bad thing. But of course, it's a council decision on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that clarity, Fiona. Do you have any other members wishing to come in at this point? I've got a hand up. Oh, it's still Fiona. Thanks, Fiona. No other members wishing to... Councillor Hagman?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. We're in 2.2, we're being asked to provide officers with any particular recommendations. And I think, we don't necessarily have all the information to make an informed decision at this point. I think it would be really useful that, for the annual review of standing orders, some of these comments that we've made this morning need to be captured. And also just a bit of clarity as well. How would a lay person be appointed? We're elected members onto the committee. I appreciate that you have unelected members on education, but they're on the committee via statutory requirements in legislation. So, how would we go about appointing lay members? And I think there's a real, it would be really useful. What would the impact assessment be? What are the risks to maybe not having full member oversight, and what are the risks for having the not proportionality, and not following perhaps good practice? So I think it would be really difficult at this point to make any specific recommendations. Obviously, we've raised various questions, but at this point, I wouldn't be comfortable with making any recommendations going forward because there's just simply not enough information before us today.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid statement. And maybe gives us the direction that we're not going to make decisions today in this respect. But do we want to provide officers with any particular recommendations, particularly, in respect of a review of standing orders through schemes of delegation, or are we quite comfortable as is? Councillor Dryborough?
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry for being late. I was in a panel looking at some King's Awards for voluntary service with the Lord Lieutenants here. Just coming back to that particular issue, I agree with Katie. This will come back, I would imagine, once it's really been endorsed. But looking at particular recommendations, I'm of the opinion that scrutiny should actually happen at the service committees. And it does. Scrutiny should happen anywhere we actually go as elected members. And we have, in the biggest percentage of the time, the fullest amount of information that we require. So I think having lay members would be so difficult to try and pick. So I would suggest that we go as is, and it's elected members that are on the scrutiny committee.
Sorry, you just dropped out ever so slightly at the end of that, Archie. Could you repeat your last sentence? If you can
it's just to say I think it would be very difficult to go through a lay member sort of recruitment process for that, and just say I think it would be elected members from Dumfries and Galloway Council that should be on the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee.
Councillor Dryborough, thank you. I've got the Vice Chair and then Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. But I don't really think it is for us to sit here and make up the composition of our own committee. I think that should be handled through due process. And the only basis I can see for bringing in lay members would purely be on a skills basis, I would think. to bolster the skill set of the committee. But like I say, I don't think it's really for us to decide the membership of our own committee.
I think that's a very valid point. Councillor Dorward.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just referring to paragraph 3.6 on page 30. It says the status of the guidance is advisory. I mean, we could all read this. And local authorities have the discretion not to adopt all of its suggestions. However, it does represent a benchmark by which a local authority may be assessed, which is quite an interesting concept. So although it's advisory, it is a benchmark. So perhaps it would be useful to have some further consideration. I wouldn't say this morning, I agree with Councillor Hagman and what you said, Chair, in terms of having some time to reflect on this and have some more information in terms of how we take this forward as a committee, because I think for future assessment, and Fiona's commented on this as well, this guidance will be used by external auditors in terms of future reporting requirements. So I think it is quite useful to have perhaps another look at it at some point in time, or perhaps the Vice Chair's also said we shouldn't be deciding who comes onto the committee. I agree with that too. Might be useful to see what other councils are doing as a benchmark as well. Suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, all very valid points. Vlad, maybe you could just take us forward in a bit more of a process. Certainly my understanding is that we can't change the composition of this committee anyway, so...
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the ask within the report is for members to consider the guidance. Within that, you'll see some of the kind of pros and cons of what's been proposed, recognising that this is UK-wide and may actually, dare I say it, potentially be more applicable to kind of English authorities than Scottish authorities as such. It's certainly a conversation we can have with our external auditors in terms of the applicability and the enforceability from their end as to how they would apply it. In terms of the benchmark, and that's I think it's a very valid point and certainly one that we as officers have considered. The issue being that at this point in time, guidance has only just come out. You haven't had a reaction yet from all the 32 local authorities in Scotland, and therefore my suggestion in terms of having some of this further conversation would be potentially to review this maybe after the summer recess, if not beyond, towards the end of the year, that we can come back with a report and hopefully see what the landscape is in Scotland, and that would provide some of the answers I think that members are seeking in terms of seeing how it's been applied, but more importantly, some of the kind of pros and cons of the various suggestions.
I think that's a very sensible suggestion. It would enable us to gather all that information, as you say, move forward in a much more informed basis. Are members fairly happy with that direction of travel, particularly Councillor Hagman, because you had a lot of unanswered questions? I've got a thumbs up from
Yes,
Councillor
thank you,
Driver.
Chair.
Good, good. Okay, with that, if there's no other members wishing to speak... Oh, Councillor Lowe. Sorry?
I was just trying to do a thumbs up.
All right, okay, thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendations, and members are asked to note and consider the publication by SIPFA of a revised professional statement on the operation of audit committees in local authorities, which I think we have done, that any necessary adjustments to the committee's remit will be progressed through existing arrangements for the periodic review of standing orders, and members are asked to provide officers with any particular recommendations that should be noted for consideration by the annual review of standing orders. And I think within that we'll just incorporate that we will receive a further report post-recess to further consider. Are members happy with that? Again, I'll take silence as agreement. Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Beretti. Moving on to item 5, which is an internal audit reports issued report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And again, Richard Fox is here to assist members with any questions. Richard, anything else to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we've just got 2 reports for you today, and I'm pleased to say that in both cases we've been able to offer members good assurance on the systems in place, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Richard. So I'll open it up to members. Do members have any questions? not seeing anybody indicating at this stage. Okay, with that, then we'll move to the recommendations, and members are asked to note and comment on the finalised internal audit reports at appendices 1 and 2. So we're noting rather than commenting, but obviously happy with that. Thanks very much, Richard. And moving on to item 6, review of council-wide risks, management of change, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And we have James McDowell, yep, he's there, excellent, thank you. And Richard Fox, who are here to assist. And I think we're going to have a presentation first. So if members are quite happy that we proceed with the presentation. Good, okay, off you go, James.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got the control in my hand here, so I'll apologise now if it doesn't go to plan. So absolutely, a small presentation just about this particular risk, management of change. So over the last few weeks, there's been a deep dive into this risk, and what we have here is just a bit of a presentation we'll just describe why it is and what we're doing at the moment and what we plan to do. So hopefully there we go. So first one is, why is it a strategic risk? And you can see there it's categorised through that description there, which is a lack of capability and skills to respond to a significant change or changes in the need for any service, resulting in loss of trust, increased costs and breaches in legislation. So that's the sort of detail that's described within the risk itself in the appendix 2 that is with the papers there. So as I say, that's where we're at with that. I'll move on. So when we go into some of the possible consequences there because of that risk, what we'll look at there is a loss of trust by the community in our ability to deliver services. That's quite a significant consequence there. Again, the next one, breach of statutory legislation through non-compliance. Required changes from Scottish Government not implemented. Again, another consequence. Increased requests for information from citizens, elected members and other organisations. Increased service costs, particularly around about the cost of living, fuel, materials and food. And reputational damage is another massive, significant consequence. Jump down to. So again, looking at the risk itself, the existing controls that we have in place at the moment. We're looking at workforce planning included in business plans to have the right people in with the right skills. And again, obviously, those business plans are aligned to our council plan, which does that. So again, it's providing that clear direction through our council plan and business plan cycle of how we deliver and how this will be delivered with the right people with the right skills. Directly engage with communities through consultation and staff to provide regular updates and receive feedback. So again, that's a good way to get a good understanding of where we are with regards to any potential consequences that comes in. Develop change management capability within the organisation. Again, we do that through our recognised training, and then horizon scanning, implement plans to support significant change. So again, we're trying to get ahead of the curve, as it were. So looking at the risk again, some planned actions that we're looking to introduce through that deep dive that we did. So give significant support to our workforce to allow for a working approach to embrace change. So again, with that confidence as well, that we've highlighted there. So having a programme of training and learning that can build that confidence within our employees and our staff. Development of the council plan with elected members. Again, we're nearly there with that, obviously, and that's everything will be built from that with regards to our business plans, team plans, one-to-ones, PDRs. Everything rolls out from that very important document as we move forward. Again, aligning business and financial planning to our council plan, and then a commitment of resources to build capability and skills. So again, that's around about that learning and development, and particularly around about leadership and management development as well, you know, to make sure we do have that skill base, that capability, that confidence, particularly with our managers, with our teams, you know, as we move forward into some of these significant change areas that we need. So we need to have that in place. And as that last one, the improved business change through that change framework. And I think that's, you know, just what I was trying to describe there with regards to having something in place that captures what we need to do as we move forward, particularly around about the business intelligence and the business analytics that's monitored and reported back to the various committees and other meetings. So there we go.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Excellent, James. Richard, do you have anything to add at this stage?
No, thank you, Chair.
Sorry?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll open the floor to members. Gosh, you're all being very quiet today. Councillor Hagman, followed by Councillor Dryborough.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking in terms of existing controls, which is page 60 of our pack, but obviously the slides were shared. There's comments there about directly engaging with our communities. Do we have a sort of a standard, this is how we do engagement for our communities? And I'm just conscious that absolutely we should be engaging with our communities and doing the best practice, but is there sort of a format that officers use? And in terms of another aspect which wasn't mentioned there, you know, the use of impact assessments, and is there an opportunity to almost enhance that work? I know we've got the impact assessment toolkit which we share with NHS and across the Health and Social Care Partnership. But is there an opportunity that we should maybe be enhancing that? If we're making significant change, we absolutely should be doing impact assessments prior to any changes. And, you know, often we sort of see a link to an impact assessment, but, you know, do we actually give that meaning going forward? I think we absolutely should be, and I think the best practice is that we should. But how do we get assurances that those are being done properly and at the correct point in time as well? So perhaps before policies are implemented, is there impact assessments done on the potential outcomes of those? So that was a couple of questions from me, Chair. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Hagman. I'll turn to James on engaging with communities, and then I think Vlad will pick up on the impact assessments. Thank you.
Thank you through yourself, Chair. Absolutely. I think consultation is very important, as you've touched on there. And I think there's been good examples with regards to how we carry out that consultation. You know, I think there's community conversations currently taking place at the moment. You know, the council plan consultation process, you know, and the consultation mandate that was put in place with regards to that. So there are mechanisms, I think, there that make sure that does happen on activities. Whether it's right across all activities is something I can take back and maybe add into this. That there is a recognised sort of framework put down in the actual risk matrix itself to bring that out, if that answers the question.
Thank you, James. I'll turn to Vlad and then back to Councillor Hagman and see if she's content.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, yeah, I think the first question there in terms of do we have processes? Yes, we've got the communities models, we've also got consultation policies, and obviously those will be applied by officers when engaging or consulting with the community and beyond at times. In terms of the second question, which is regarding the impact assessment, as members will be aware, we've got by law the quality impact assessments that we must carry out when there's a significant change to policy or strategy, and certainly we are carrying those out in terms of compliance first and foremost. I take the point about Is there a better way of potentially reporting that to members? The links are provided, and it's important that members check these equality and impact assessments before making decisions. However, I think moving forward, we do have a revised template report that will be brought after summer recess for members that will particularly highlight that particular section within reports, and hopefully that, you know, we're happy to obviously see how that comes out and get feedback from members, but I'm hopeful that that particular template with that particular paragraph will highlight any issues that have been identified within the relevant impact assessments.
Thanks very much, Vlad. Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and certainly I think as a council we're very good at engaging with our communities, or at least trying to engage with our communities. You know, there's lots of opportunities, but whether the community is empowered or actually feels able to actually get involved with processes is sometimes perhaps out with our control. In regards to the impact assessment, I mean, yes, absolutely, we've got a statutory legal duty, but my question is more so, how are we enhancing that? Because I'd be disappointed to think that we're only doing the bare minimum of what we have to when we're looking at the impact assessment, you know, under the Equalities Act. I'm slightly concerned if we don't look at the potential impacts before we start developing policy. And I guess that's my question. At what point do officers think about the impact prior to even coming to members for a decision? Because I think it's absolutely crucial that we can do that sort of horizon scanning of what are the potential impacts before we develop the policy to ensure that actually we have, you know, equality embedded throughout all our policies. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hagman. I'll turn back to Vlad.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hagman. Yes, it's a very valid point, and it's certainly something that I, as a monitoring officer, with colleagues in governance and legal services, emphasise in terms of the need to be carrying out equality impact assessments in particular, but all-round impact assessments and early stages of drafting or following through with relevant changes to policies and procedures. Couldn't agree more with that particular statement. We're obviously driving at that kind of early intervention with legal services in particular, ensuring that we are catching these things out as early as we can so that that can inform our policy. And obviously from an equality impact assessment, one of the questions is, does it impact on the relevant categories? And we have to look at that. We sometimes don't know that unless we ask the question. So an officer sitting alone looking at a policy might not be aware whether there's a particular impact on one of those categories. So it's important that we engage, that we consult, and we go through due process in terms of the quality impact assessment and other assessments that we also carry out, so that we can highlight any implications of that to you as members in decision making, but more importantly from our end it should inform the policy drafting.
Thanks very much for that reassurance. I'll turn to Councillor Dryborough and then Councillor Dorward.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've put my earpieces in, hopefully that you can hear me a little better than what you did the first time. Actually, it's quite good to follow that question from Katie, because I'm on the next page, on page 61, looking at the planned actions. So the first bullet point says, give significant support to a workforce to allow for a working approach to embrace change with confidence. And the second bullet point is, for the bottom, is a commitment of resources for building capability and skills to support the implementation of change. Now, we've been through the last couple of years a massive change process, and there are times when, you know, the staff will embrace with confidence certain parts of any change programme that's coming up. And one of the ways to sort of support that is obviously get early involvement from our trade union colleagues and the staff themselves. So looking at that approach and the embrace change with confidence, it has to be right for everybody, of course. How then do we know that the change that is being suggested will be embraced by the staff if they've already been through a massive change programme over the last 2 or 3 years? And perhaps the best way to get that confidence It's just to stop for a little bit and then ensure that the change is right. And if the change is right, that will instill the confidence in the members of staff. I'm just wondering how we measure that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dryburgh. I'll turn to James.
Absolutely, no problem to yourself, Chair. Good question, Councillor Dryburgh, and I'll do my best to respond to that. I think absolutely the last couple of years have been a significant introduced a significant change to all of us throughout the council and obviously wider. And I think on the back of that, what we did was have a supportive workforce conversation programme. So staff engagement, I think, is front and centre with regards to that. So we can reflect together, we can recognise what we've gone through together, and then start to look at how we then move forward as an organisation. So I think, you know, the programme of conversations we had last year gave us a real good sense of how our staff feel out there. We were able then to put that in place through a You Said We Did document that has been communicated out to all staff. And what we're looking at now for this year is another programme of supportive workforce conversations 2023, which again gives us that real rich information direct from the staff in a safe space where they can engage with us. I think that the work that the Strategic Health and Wellbeing Group do regards to listening again and understanding what the feeling is out there in services, so that wellbeing and making sure we put in the support for wellbeing is another one. And what we're looking at this year is, as part of the people strategy, is an action within the people strategy is a people survey. So basically staff survey. So we've been through procurement with regards to that, and at the moment we're looking to build some questions, and through stakeholder engagement we'll build those questions and take them to SLT and yourselves obviously for comment on. So again, I think all these different aspects that we're looking to introduce gives us a good feeling of how our staff feel and how then we can respond to that as we move forward, because absolutely, you know, the significant change we've been through has been quite significant. Hopefully that answers some of the questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James. Councillor Dryburgh.
Yes, thanks for that, James. It's just there was one sort of missing part in the answer there, and that was the early engagement of trade unions. And I know the trade unions are involved in a lot of this going forward. I just wanted to make sure that they were advised as early as possible when suggestions and projects and programmes like this come up.
James?
Absolutely, and I think we've got a few mechanisms for that as well through the Joint Consultative Group. Obviously, we take our papers there to give that early engagement with the joint trade unions. We meet with them on a monthly basis, and you know, they do form quite a big part of our project groups. You know, the people survey, as I say, the joint trade unions are part of that project team as we move that forward. So absolutely 100% agree with that massive player in you know, in supporting us moving forward.
Thanks very much, James. I'll move to Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I'm looking at the Appendix 2 on page 63 in terms of risk mitigation, and a little question about existing internal controls. And the first one is workforce planning included in business plans to have the right people with the right skills, which is right and proper. And that will identify who we need, I would suggest. But I know we have challenges in terms of attracting the right people into D&G. So in terms of controlling or mitigating a risk, whilst we can identify who we need, we can't always get who we need. So is there something to be done perhaps about that in terms of attracting the right individuals into Dumfries and Galloway Council to help manage the change process? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dorward. I'll turn to Vlad.
Thank you, Chair. If I could come back on that one, I think Councillor Dorward's maybe preempted a future risk that we're going to bring through from the kind of corporate risk management group that we have, and that is the workforce one. And absolutely that kind of finer details as to how we mitigate some of the points that Councillor Dorward's raised will be brought forward the risk management group thereafter through the right governance process of SLT, CMT, and thereafter this particular committee. So the committee will get an opportunity to scrutinise that particular risk in due course.
Thanks very much for that, Vlad. Councillor Dorward, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Good. It's certainly a nationwide issue with workforce planning at the moment, and I know there's pinch areas in particular vocations that are very challenging. So we do need to acknowledge that that is a big risk for us within certain areas. James, just from myself, the staff survey, when will that go live and be concluded, and how will that report back through our systems?
Absolutely. So we're looking to go live May, June this year. So that's the sort of live date, and then it gives us the sort of recess period to work with the partner through procurement to analyse the data and get it into a format that then will come back to committee and report on that. I would imagine it'll be in our committee in the first instance with the people strategy being reported back there. So, but May, June is the deadline with regards to having the survey out. And what we plan to do at the same time is have our supportive workforce conversation programme. So they're running parallel with each other, so that when we're out face-to-face engaging with staff, we can be using the time to get the survey completed as well at the same time. So, you know, especially for the hard to, you know, non-office-based staff. So, so that's the timescale.
Thanks very much for that. And one other question, which Councillor Hagman raised around engaging with communities. Are we tracking in any way consultation fatigue? I mean, I'm very aware that we've got some really proactive community groups out there, but they're being bombarded with consultations at times, whether it be through Health and Social Care Partnership, Education, South of Scotland Enterprise. You know, there's lots of different arms that are trying to consult. And do we track and monitor what impact that consultation fatigue could have on the data that we get? Or is it not something that we've considered? It is being flagged up in lots of areas now.
It's certainly something we're looking to keep an eye on with workforce, with staff, because on the back of the people survey, we'll bring out engagement framework, you know, and sort of principles about how, you know, what do we mean by engagement and when to engage. And because you're absolutely right, it's not a case of, it's not to stop it all, but it's to make sure it's you know, done in a coordinated approach that doesn't cause that fatigue. And just here's another survey, as it were. So so absolutely there'll be a framework that will come off the as an action out of the people survey.
Great, thanks very much. Do I have any other members wishing to speak? Nobody indicating at the moment. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendations. So we've been asked to agree to receive a presentation by a lead officer at 2.1, which we've done. At 2.2, note the existing measures in place and planned actions to manage the Council's management of change risk as detailed in Appendix 2, and consider whether these are sufficient. And at 2.3, consider the implications of the management of change risk on Council activities. Are we happy to agree, note and consider all of those? Thumbs up from Councillor Barretti. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thanks very much, James. So we're now moving on to item 7, which is Dumfries and Galloway Council's Risk Management Arrangements, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And Richard Fox is again here to assist members with any questions. Anything to add to the report, Richard?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing at this stage. Happy to take questions.
Good. So I'll open the floor to members. I'm not... Oh, Councillor Hagman, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in 2.3, it makes reference that we're to note that the UK leaving the EU and COVID-19 have been earmarked for removal from the council-wide risk register. I'm just wondering, you know, those, in my opinion, are still very much risks that we're working through in terms of, we were talking there previously about recruitment, etc. And actually in health and social care, there's real shortages of recruitment. And, I'm just wondering why is that decision being taken to remove those?
I'll turn to Richard.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's not saying those issues haven't gone away. What we're saying is these have been managed as business as usual. So to use the example, we're talking about a workforce risk council-wide, but each service will have its own workforce issues and will have its own workforce risk to address recruitment issues. To deal with the particular UK leaving the EU, COVID-19, we're now very much in the recovery phase. I certainly don't claim to be an expert on public health management for COVID-19, but I understand now we're treating this as a almost endemic disease within society we manage as part of ongoing business as opposed to a future risk for the future, if that helps.
Thanks very much, Richard. I'll turn to Vlad.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm what Richard has said, but also just to expand that those particular risks will be more or less, as I said, it's kind of business as usual within and encompassed within some of the other council-wide risks that we've got, particularly laying off demands. And that's very much where we see this in terms of it is just laying another demand on the council in terms of some of the issues and risks that are identified through the UK leaving the EU or COVID-19 itself. So they're no longer standalone risks. They will be part and parcel of the other council-wide risks that you've got there.
Thanks very much for that, Vlad. Councillor Hagman, are you comfortable with that response?
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I appreciate the response regarding COVID-19. I'm not quite as comfortable in the leaving the EU because I think we're still very much feeling the ramifications of that as a council-wide. But if they're still going to be embedded in the individual directorates, etc., as risks, then I appreciate that. But I am concerned about the impact of leaving the EU as we're still being faced by the council. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that. Do I have any other members wishing to come in at this stage? Not seeing anybody indicating. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendations, and members are asked to, at 2.1, note the work that has been carried out during 2022 by the Council's Risk Management Group. At 2.2, agree the adequacy of risk management practices as per the delegations to this committee through review of the Council's Strategic Risk Register, Council-wide Risk Register and scrutiny of individual risks. And 2.3, note that risks relating to the UK leaving the EU and COVID-19 have been earmarked for removal from the Council-wide Register. Are we happy to note and agree those recommendations? Good, no dissent. Item 8, moving on to the annual report of the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee 2022, report by Head of Governance and Assurance, and we have Fraser Davis here to assist members with any questions. Anything to add to the report, Fraser? Thanks very much, James.
No, nothing to add, Chair. Just happy to take questions.
Okay, I'll open the floor to members. Councillor Dryber, you're yellow on my iPad, but not yellow on the main screen.
Don't have my thumb up.
Oh, right, okay. Just double checking, just in case. Yeah. I don't have any members indicating they wish to speak, so with that we'll move to the recommendations, and we're asked to consider at 2.1 the work completed by this committee from January 2022 to December 2022 as set out in Appendix 1, and consider at 2.2 the committee members' assessment of their performance against the Audit Scotland Audit Committee checklist as referenced in paragraph 3.4 and in Appendix 2. So we've considered those. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, the Service and Area Committee reporting. and scrutiny arrangements January 2022 to December 2022, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And again, Fraser is here to assist members with any questions. Anything to add to the report?
Nothing beyond the report, but happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. I'll open the floor to members. You seem to be getting off very lightly today, Fraser. Your report must have been excellent. No questions is a good indication of a report that's covered every eventuality. Okay, if I have no members wishing to speak at this stage, we'll move to the recommendations, and we're asked to consider at 2.1 the report submitted to service and area committees relating to business plan performance reports and quality standards and inspection reports from January 2022 to December 2022 as set out in the appendix. And at 2.2, agree that the reporting and scrutiny arrangements evidence effective arrangements that are in place across our council. So we're happy to consider and agree those. Thanks very much, Fraser. So on to item 10, Scrutiny Reviews 2023, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And again, we have Fraser Davis. I don't think Hugh's here, is he? Are they online? Are they online? That's perfect. There's Hugh online, and Annie Johnson should be with us as well. And they're here to assist any members with questions. Anything to add to the report, Fraser? No.
Again, nothing, I'm afraid.
Hugh, Annie, are you quite happy to proceed with members' questions? Nods the head. Excellent, brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm really pleased that these two are actually coming forward for a review, especially the school transport one and the children with additional needs support. Not so much, well, maybe a little bit of a question, specifically with the school transport one. Obviously, I was involved in communities and how that link between communities and education gets transport organised, specifically for children with additional support needs. So I'm hoping that you're going to be looking at that as well. Although the children with additional support needs is a different review, there is certain issues that education, for instance, don't pay for a lot of the transport that the Communities Directorate provide. So are you going to be particularly looking at that area? I'm really happy that the review's coming forward. And I suggest that you maybe speak to communities members across in the West in particular who deal with this transport for schools. But I just wanted to make sure that there's going to be a discussion between education and communities as well on this.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Dryborough. I'll turn to Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reassure Councillor Dryborough that there are ongoing, very detailed discussions between ourselves and colleagues in communities around the additional support transport issues that we're currently dealing with, and further discussions in terms of the budget responsibilities and where that should sit. So just be able to really reassure the Councillor that there's a lot of work that's ongoing, being led by Susan Martin at the moment.
Thanks very much, Hugh. Are you happy with that, Councillor Dryborough?
Extremely, thanks, Chair.
Excellent, excellent. Do I have any other members wishing to come in at this point? We've got, obviously, the scope of the reviews within Appendices 1 and 2. And again, Fraser's done a super job of putting those together. So I'm not seeing anybody else indicating at this stage, so we'll move to the recommendations. And members have been asked to consider and agree the scrutiny review scopes detailed in Appendices 1 and 2, which I think we're quite happy to consider and agree. And I totally agree that these are two really crucial pieces of work that do intertwine and have probably been in need of a bit of a review for a while. So with that, we've considered and agreed those. Thank you. So item 11, Draft Annual Governance Statement 2022 to 23. Report by Head of Governance and Assurance, and we have Fraser Davis, Claire Rogerson and Jackie Holland here to assist members. Is Jackie online? Oh no, Jackie's over there. Good to see you. Sorry. So again, anything to add to the reports?
I've got nothing to add. I don't know if any of my colleagues do.
No, but that's fine. Good. I'll open it up to members. And I don't seem to have anybody indicating to come in at this stage. No. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendations, and members are asked to consider the draft annual governance statement 2022-23 in the appendix, and at this stage in the process of its development. So we're happy to consider that. Thank you very much. So item 12, any other business deemed urgent by the Chair. I haven't been notified of any other urgent business, so I'd just like to thank you all for your participation and attendance today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.